Hi, it's Laura.com18. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. This is my VR to the tag Mid-Year Book Freakout tag. It's not really mid-year anymore. Mid-year was a couple of weeks ago, but better late than never. A couple of my friends here on YouTube have done this tag, and it seems like a good kind of mid-year check-in in terms of how reading is going so far. Gives a chance to talk about some of the highs and lows of the year so far in terms of books, so I figure happy to make a VR, always happy to talk about books. So without further ado, I'll get to the first question, and of course I'll timestamp and put all the prompts below. So the first question is the best book you've read so far in 2022. And I have read a lot of really good books in 2022. I've given quite a few 5-star reviews. I've found that since I've been really quite consciously curating my reading selections and talking about books here more, I've had a really good time reading and really good, I don't want to say luck, but I've found a lot of really great books. And this year has been no exception. It's hard to choose, but the one that has stuck with me that I'm going to say is the best book that I've read in 2022 is Goliath by Tochi Onyebuchi. This is a science fiction novel. It is set in the 2050s, and it follows a series of characters, some of whom are on Earth, some of whom are on space colonies near Earth, and it deals with themes of gentrification and environmental racism as those with means and with privilege are able to leave the Earth and live on these space colonies, and those who do not have the wealth to do so are left on Earth, which is, polluted and damaged in all kinds of ways. And those on the space colonies are taking resources continually from the Earth, literally taking brick by brick from those who are left on Earth. It's written almost like a series of short stories that are interconnected, or a series of vignettes. It's a quite unconventional structure in terms of having kind of multiple points of view that aren't really returned to. I think it's done really, really effectively. This is such a well done novel. It has stuck with me since I read it, and it was one of the earliest books that I read in 2022. It was, I think, the first new release of the year that I, had already had on pre-order. I read an advanced reader copy and I wanted to buy the hardcover, so I did. This is my pick for the Hugo for Best Novel. I don't think anything is going to unseat it from being my pick for Best Novel of 2022. Really, really, really excellent. So that is the best book I've read so far in 2022. Tochi Onyebuchi's Goliath. Really, really excellent. The second question is the best sequel that you've read so far in 2022. And a lot of the books I don't actually have to physically show you because I read a lot of ebooks, but I've been playing around with some editing software, so there may or may not end up being a book image posted up here as I'm talking about some of the books. We'll see. Maybe this will be the video where that finally happens on this channel. The best sequel that I've read so far in 2022, I'm going to say, was The Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri. This is a sequel to The Jasmine Throne, and these are epic fantasy novels set in a India-inspired setting. They're very much, I think, feminist novels. They're very women-led books. They are queer books as well, and I thought that The Oleander Sword, was great as a sequel, but also a really solid book on its own. I wouldn't suggest reading it without having read The Jasmine Throne first, because it really does pick up right where the first novel left off. And it presumes you know quite a lot about the characters already. But this series, and it's going to be, I believe it's planned to be a trilogy, so there'll be a third book, sooner the better, because I'm excited. This series, perhaps more than any other trilogy that I'm currently reading or that I've read recently, is exactly what I want in epic fantasy. It is exactly what I want in every respect. It is so well written. It's politically interesting. The characters are well developed. The plot is compelling. Everything about Tasha Suri's Jasmine Throne and Oleander Sword, I like. I think it's so good. So if you haven't read that series and you enjoy reading fantasy, then I would definitely say to pick up the Jasmine Throne and also the Oleander Sword, which is the best sequel I've read so far. Number 3, new release that you haven't read yet but want to. I really want to read Janelle Monáe's The Memory Librarian and Other Stories of Dirty Computer, which are short stories. A lot of them I think are co-written short stories with different authors based on the kind of world of the Dirty Computer album by Janelle Monáe. And I'm a fan. I'm such a fan. I love Janelle Monáe. I like the album a lot. And the album has this kind of world building component to it, and much of her work does, that I think a book is a really interesting choice, and I'm glad that it's that it's available, and I really want to read it, and I just haven't gotten a chance yet. So that's the one, The Memory Librarian. There are quite a few on that list, but that's the one that kind of sticks out as it's come out and I just haven't picked it up yet. Question number 4, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And it may surprise that it's not a science fiction or fantasy book. My most anticipated release for the second half of this year is A Minor Chorus, a novel by Billy Ray Belcourt, which is estimated to come out in October, early October. And it is a book that follows a queer Indigenous doctoral student who is writing a novel and writes about a kind of series of encounters that he has with other characters. And the reason that I'm so looking forward to A Minor Chorus is because I fairly recently read A History of My Brief Body by Billy Ray Belcourt. And I talked about this book at the time that I read it. And this book was extraordinary. This book is extraordinary. I would read this again, actually. Billy Ray Belcourt is a award-winning poet, and this is a kind of memoir, I suppose. It's a poetic memoir. He is a writer and scholar from the Driftpile Cree Nation, who has won a number of prestigious awards for his work, including particularly his poetry, which I have not read his prior poetry books. I just saw this book and it captivated me. In part because of the back here. And I am so excited for Billy Ray Belcourt to write a novel. I will get it the day that it comes out. So that's my most anticipated. Take a little sip of water before I get to question number 5, the biggest disappointment. The biggest disappointments of 2022 reading for me. I suppose for this question what I had to choose were my DNFs, because, if I didn't even finish a book, it means I'm disappointed, obviously. And I've only had 2, I think, that I could remember, DNFs in calendar year 2022 so far. One of them was World of Wonders in Praise of Fireflies, Whale Sharks, and Other Astonishments by Amy Nizuku Matatil. And this one was a disappointment DNF for me, because the description of the book was, and I'm just reading here, a collection of essays about the natural world and the way its inhabitants can teach, support, and inspire us. And if you watch my channel, learning about animals and the messages that other non-human animals have for us and what we can learn from them is something that I'm really passionate about and really enjoy exploring and is a big part of my personal practice. This is not what the book did. To me, it was a series of essays about Amy Nizuku Matatil with slight references to animals in each one. And so, it's not that the book was badly written. I believe she's also a poet, and I'm sure, her poetry is excellent, and I would happily pick up a book of her poetry. This was just a disappointment because it really, I don't think, is what it was marketed as. So, the thing that I was really looking forward to wasn't there. My other disappointment, somewhat similarly, actually, is a novel, City of Dusk by Tara Sim, apologies, I'm not sure. And City of Dusk, on paper, looked like a book that I would be really into. The description is a adult dark epic fantasy trilogy, or it's the first book in the trilogy, following the four heirs of four noble houses, each gifted with a divine power, as they form a tenuous alliance to keep their kingdom from descending into realm-shattering war. I did not think that this was dark, I did not think it was epic, and I did not think it was adult. So, DNF. It to me, is not marketed in terms of what it is. And so, it did not work for me. I'm sure that there's an audience for it, and I'm sure that, you know, a lot of people will really like it. It's just not my thing at all. So, City of Dusk was the other disappointment for me. Biggest surprise is question number 6. Biggest surprise reading so far in 2022. And for that one, I chose Nazare by J.J. Amaworo Wilson. I've talked about his work before in my recent video on sci-fi fantasy authors you should check out, where I shared some free short stories online. I shared one of his. This book is the biggest surprise, not because I'm surprised that I liked it. I had read his first book and I really liked that one, so I figured that I would like this one as well. It's the biggest surprise because as soon as I saw that J.J. Amaworo Wilson had another novel, I just bought it without reading the description at all. I saw that it was a novel, I saw the cover, and I said, yep, this is a book that I want. And it actually came out in 2021, and as soon as I learned that it existed, it fell into my shopping cart and came to me. So it was a surprise because I had no idea what I was going to get, but it was a great surprise. And so I really, really enjoyed this. The way that J.J. Amaworo Wilson does magical realism, you know, it's very whimsical, and he deals with serious kinds of political dynamics and topics and things like this, but it is laugh out loud funny to me. Some of his sentences, just how he writes is so special and unlike anything I have ever read in my life. But this was a surprise because I had no idea what the plot was when I bought it. So that was a happy surprise. Number 7, favorite new author. Either new in terms of their debut being in 2022, or new as in they're a new author to me. So both of these are new to me. They're not authors that just published for the first time. And I chose 2. For fiction, my favorite new author is Nikki Drayden, who wrote the Escaping Exodus duology. So Escaping Exodus and Escaping Exodus Symbiosis. Escaping Exodus was picked as the Team Sci-Fi Fantasy group read for Blackathon, the Black History Month readathon, several months ago. And so I read the book then, and they are very much queer science fiction. And so the sequel I read during Pride Month in June. And these 2 books are, I think, very thoughtfully done, very unique. Unique is such a terrible descriptor, right? Because it tells you absolutely nothing. But they are really quite unusual. They're very body horror filled, which is not necessarily something that I tend to go for, because the characters in these books have created effectively spaceships to live inside that are made out of giant creatures. Like they're living inside of giant space-dwelling creatures. And so they're living inside of the cavern of an animal's body, right? So all of the kinds of descriptions that come along with that permeate these 2 books. But they have a lot to do with both the kind of social dynamics of these communities that obviously are existing with extraordinarily finite resources and have developed these kinds of political structures to kind of deal with the challenges of that, but then also the relationship between the people and the animal in which they live, and what that looks like in terms of it being a very exploitative relationship, and then some attempts to try to revision what that could be like, right? And really just unlike anything I've ever come across before. And I think that Nikki Drayden is fabulous, and I am looking forward to reading more from her. For nonfiction, favorite new author, again, it's a new author to me, is absolutely no doubt Saidiya Hartman, who wrote this book, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, Intimate Histories of Riotous Black Girls, Troublesome Women, and Queer Radicals. This is really extraordinary archival research work. And as somebody who did archival research for their graduate work, I have so much kind of respect and admiration and awe for what Saidiya Hartman can do with these archival sources. And it's beautifully written, and I am looking forward to reading her other work as well. So definitely kind of a nonfiction highlight of the year for me, and a nonfiction favorite author, new to me this year. Number 8, newest fictional crush. I know that my book and TerraTube pal, Mariana Moss, loves this question, and that this is like her question. I will say this is not my question. I think it's a fun question, but it's one that I find kind of challenging, perhaps because of the books that I tend to go for, not necessarily being full of characters that I would have a crush on, we'll say. Newest, I really struggled. I could probably pick Priya from the Oleander Sword, but again, not totally new because I read The Jasmine Throne last year, and Priya was in that book as well. You know, magic wielding badass. You know, that's crush worthy to me. You know, not new, but the best I could come up with for this question. I do find that one a bit tough to answer. Number 9 was newest favorite character, and I had to also just not pick something totally new, but another favorite sequel of the year so far was A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers, which I just finished reading, which is the second book in the Monk and Robot series. And the Monk and Robot series follows sibling Dex, who's a tea monk who goes from town to town serving tea and talking to people, and Mosscap, who is a robot, and a human and a robot haven't encountered each other for many generations in this book, and the first two to do so are Dex and Mosscap. And the two of them together, like each of them on their own, but also particularly the two of them together, they are the character highlight of my year for sure. Wonderful and heartwarming, and the Monk and Robot books are like a hug book. You know, they're a warm cup of tea, suitably enough, while also being, you know, very substantial, and in the sense of having a lot of substance and dealing with interesting things in interesting ways. But favorite characters, sibling Dex and Mosscap. Number 10, book that made you cry. Easy answer, Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Okparanta. This one follows a protagonist, Ijeoma, who's growing up amidst war in Nigeria, and she experiences the loss of a parent in that context, and she also grows up experiencing homophobia as she finds that she is attracted to her female friend, and she goes through a lot of things that I can understand and that, you know, left me crying, we'll say. In terms of her experiences with her mother trying to kind of pray the gay away, for lack of better phrasing, trying to get by hiding who she is. And that was a tough book. It was a tough book to read. It was an incredible book, but a very tough book to read for me, and left me in tears numerous times. Occasionally happy tears as well, but lots of sad tears in Under the Udala Trees for sure. Number 11, book that made you happy. Becky Chambers, Prayer for the Crown Shy, Monk and Robot 2. This book just brought me so much joy. I would, be reading it in bed, and I would have to read a little quote out loud to share just how joyful this book is. Like, it makes my heart bigger to follow Mosscap and Dex. I love Monk and Robot. I love Becky Chambers books in general. Make me feel that way, but the Monk and Robot series is something special. Number 12, the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. I read a lot of ebooks, so I don't actually have a lot of physical books. I do think that they did a beautiful job with the faces and the rocky terrain or bricks on the cover of Goliath. It looks really nice, and I really like the yellow in the front cover. I also chose for a beautiful book, A Handful of Earth, A Handful of Sky, The World of Octavia E. Butler by Lionel George. This is another definite non-fiction favorite of the year as well. And I like this book aesthetically because there's lots of interesting inclusions of Octavia Butler's handwriting there, and different scenes from places that she lived, and little items from her ephemera from her archives, an order from Rushton's Tall Girl Shoes there, and I just like the way that the author has used different fonts to mark out Octavia's writing from her own. And so I think that just aesthetically the book is really successful. And I think that is a beautiful picture of Octavia as well. And the last question, number 13. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? There's lots of books I want to read by the end of the year. I see this tag as the too many books, too little time. Like mid-year book freak out because, oh my goodness, there's so many more books to read. And that's already halfway through the year. But for just to mention one, I will say, and it's not a new release or a forthcoming book or anything, the book I want to read by the end of the year is City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty, because the City of Brass has been recommended to me so many times as a book that I would love by people who I really like, whose reading tastes I know, overlap with mine, that I really just need to read this book. It's been suggested so many times by people whose recommendations I trust. And also, it has been sitting on my e-reader forever. I put City of Brass on my e-reader for traveling in my last international trip that I took, thinking this would be one that I could read while I was away. And now, international travel means we're talking early 2020, because I have not been anywhere for years like many of the rest of us. So it's been on the Kindle a little bit too long. I need to read City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty before the end of the year, because I think that I will really enjoy it. And it's the first book in a trilogy that is all out, which is great, because a lot of the series I'm reading right now are in progress. And it would be great to read a trilogy that I don't have to wait for the next book, especially because I anticipate really liking it. So that's the one I need to read by the end of the year. That's my mid-year book freakout. Thanks for checking out the video. I look forward always to chatting about books in the comment section. If you've read any of the books I've mentioned, do let me know what you thought. And I look forward to seeing more folks VRs. I'm sure others will be VRing late like me. So have a good one. I'll see you again soon.